Please subscribe to the channel to help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. The helo bucked in the fierce Antarctic wind, the rotors whipping up a blizzard of ice crystals that obscured the already bleak landscape. Below us, nothing but white, an endless, frozen wasteland stretching to the horizon. We were as far south as you could get without actually being a penguin, on a mission so classified, most of NATO probably didn't even know it existed. Our target, a long-forgotten Nazi bunker, designated Neuschwabenland, a relic of a bygone era that had been deemed non-priority for decades, until now. Something had changed. Something had triggered the brass to send us, a six-man squad, to the literal end of the world. I glanced around the cramped interior of the helicopter. Jonah O'Neill, our Irish veteran, was grinning, seemingly unfazed by the turbulence or the mission's ominous nature. He caught my eye and winked, the picture of reckless confidence. Across from him, Alexander Petrov, our Russian heavy weapons specialist, sat stoic and silent, his gaze fixed on the swirling white outside. He was always watchful, always scanning for threats, a habit that had probably saved our asses more than once. Next to him was Lena Müller, our German engineer. She was the reason we were here, the expert on Nazi bunker designs. But there was something in her eyes, a shadow of what? Knowledge? Fear? I couldn't quite place it, but it made me uneasy. She'd been briefing us on the flight down, filling us in on the scant details available about Neuschwabenland. The most disturbing part? The fact that previous expeditions decades ago had simply vanished. No distress calls, no wreckage, just gone. Lena had mentioned unexplained phenomena and anomalous energy readings, but her tone suggested she knew more than she was letting on. Luis Torres, our Spanish comms guy, was nervously fiddling, with his headset, his usual forced humor absent. He looked like he was about to be sick, and honestly, I didn't blame him. Even for a seasoned soldier, this mission felt wrong. There was a weight in the air, a sense of impending dread that went beyond the usual pre-mission jitters. And then there was Matthias Weber, the other German member of our team. He was older, more reserved, his family having, as it was delicately put, historical connections to the original founders of the bunker. He'd been quiet for most of the flight, staring out the window with a strange expression. Just before we started our descent, he muttered something under his breath. Something about a calling and the depths. I couldn't make out the rest, but it sent a shiver down my spine. The wind howled like a banshee, mirroring the unease that was quickly spreading through our team. The helicopter lurched violently, pulling me out of my thoughts. We were descending. The pilot, a gruff American who hadn't said a word since takeoff, expertly maneuvered the chopper through the swirling snow. And then, through a break in the whiteout, I saw it. A massive, metallic structure, almost completely buried beneath the ice. It was angular, brutalist, a stark contrast to the organic curves of the surrounding landscape. Only a single, triangular entrance was visible, a dark maw leading into the frozen earth. It looked less like a bunker and more like the entrance to some ancient, forgotten tomb. The scale of it was breathtaking and deeply unsettling. This wasn't some hastily constructed outpost. This was a fortress, built to withstand anything, or perhaps to keep something in. We touched down with a jarring thud, the snow spraying up around us like a shroud. The temperature outside was a bone-chilling 50 degrees Celsius, the kind of cold that could kill you in minutes if you weren't properly equipped. The wind ripped at us as we exited the helicopter, the noise deafening. Before we even took a step towards the entrance, Matthias spoke again, his voice barely audible above the wind. "It's calling," he said, his eyes wide and unfocused. "It's calling from below." He pointed a trembling finger towards the dark entrance of the bunker, his face pale with a mixture of fear and something else. Something that looked disturbingly like anticipation. The rest of us exchanged uneasy glances. This was not starting well. This was starting very, very badly. The mission had barely begun, and already the icy grip of the Antarctic was tightening, not just around our bodies, but around our minds. The forgotten Nazi bunker awaited, and whatever secrets it held were about to be revealed. We all knew it, and none of us were sure we wanted to know the answers. The heavy metal door creaked open with a groan that echoed through the frozen air, revealing a dimly lit corridor that stretched into the darkness. The air that rushed out was surprisingly warm, carrying with it a musty metallic scent that stung my nostrils. It was the smell of old machinery, of stale air, and something else. Something indefinable, but deeply unsettling. We stepped inside, our boots crunching on a thin layer of frost that coated the floor. The immediate contrast between the brutal cold outside and the stale warmth within was jarring, a physical manifestation of the strangeness of this place. The corridor was wider than I'd expected, easily large enough to drive a vehicle through. The walls were lined with thick cables and pipes, most of them encased in ice. Faded Nazi propaganda posters adorned the walls, depicting idealized Aryan figures and slogans proclaiming the glory of the Third Reich. But it was the dates on some of the posters that caught my attention. They didn't make sense. Some were from the 1940s, as expected, but others were from the future. Dates like 1958, 1965, even one from 1972. It was impossible. This bunker was supposed to have been abandoned in 1945. Had it been? Or had something else been going on here? Something that defied the known timeline. The unsettling feeling in my gut intensified. Lena immediately began examining the electrical panels, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The power, it's still on," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and concern. "This shouldn't be possible. The generators should have run out of fuel decades ago." She traced a finger along a thick cable, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "And the design? It's advanced. Far more advanced than anything I've seen from this era." I glanced at Alexander, who was sweeping the corridor with his weapon light, his face grim. He clearly didn't like this any more than I did. Jonah, ever the optimist, clapped him on the shoulder. "Relax, comrade," he said with a forced grin. "Maybe they just had really good batteries." But even his forced levity couldn't mask the underlying tension. We moved deeper into the bunker, the corridor opening into a vast cavernous space. It was like an underground factory filled with massive silent machinery. Huge tanks, their purpose unknown, lined the walls. Cranes hung suspended from the ceiling, frozen in time. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and decay. This place was far larger, far more complex than the initial reports had indicated. It was a subterranean city, a testament to the scale of the Nazi ambition, and perhaps to the scale of their madness. Lena led us towards a series of offices, their doors hanging open, revealing desks covered in dust and papers. She sifted through the documents, her eyes scanning the faded German text. "There's mention of a project here," she said, her voice hushed. "Das Erwachen, the awakening." She looked up at us, her face pale. "It's vague, but it seems to have been their primary focus. Something to do with unlocking potential." Unlocking potential? The phrase sent a chill down my spine. What kind of potential were they talking about? Matthias, who had been increasingly silent and withdrawn, suddenly stopped, his head cocked to one side. "I hear them," he whispered, his eyes wide and unfocused. "The whispers." He started walking towards a darkened alcove, his movements jerky and unnatural. "Matthias!" I called out, but he didn't respond. He was in a trance, drawn by something we couldn't hear, couldn't see. Alexander moved to intercept him. "Stay put, soldat," Alexander commanded in authoritative tone. We followed him cautiously, our weapons raised. The alcove was empty, except for a large, cracked mirror leaning against the wall. As we approached, Matthias reached out and touched the mirror's surface. He stared at his reflection, his expression shifting from confusion to horror. "It's smiling," he stammered, his voice trembling. "My reflection. It's smiling at me." I looked at the mirror. Matthias's reflection was staring back at us, his face pale and strained. But it wasn't smiling. It was a perfect mirror image of the terrified man standing in front of it. "It is not smiling, soldat. Alexander spoke again, but this time, his voice had lost a little authority. It is smiling, Matthias cried, stepping away from the mirror. I stepped forward to look at the mirror, but I was sure that Matthias was just imagining it. But my confidence evaporated when I looked at my own face on the mirror. It was me, but something was off. The face that looked at me from the mirror was smiling, a grotesque grin on his face. I blinked and the image returned to normal. Had I imagined it? The air grew colder, the unsettling feeling in the bunker intensifying. We were not alone. Something was here with us, something hidden in the shadows, something that was playing with our minds. And whatever das Erwachen was, it was becoming increasingly clear that it was something far more terrifying than we could have ever imagined. We were trapped, deep underground, in a forgotten Nazi bunker, with something that was slowly, but surely, beginning to awaken. And I had a sinking feeling that we were not going to like what we found. The bunker was more than just a relic of the past. It was a living, breathing entity, and we were intruders in its domain. Lena, Matthias, and I continued deeper into the bunker, branching off from the main chamber to explore what appeared to be a research wing. Jonah, Alexander, and Luis headed in the opposite direction, towards what Lena believed was the power generation sector. We agreed to maintain radio contact, but even the thought of splitting up in this place sent a fresh wave of unease through me. The air in the research wing was even colder, the silence more profound, broken only by the rhythmic drip of water somewhere in the darkness. The corridor was lined with laboratories, their doors ajar, revealing glimpses of strange equipment and shattered glassware. We entered one of the larger labs, the air thick with the smell of chemicals and something else, something organic, that made my stomach churn. The room was dominated by a row of massive cylindrical chambers, made of thick glass and reinforced steel. They looked like cryo chambers. Some were empty, their doors hanging open, revealing only frost-covered interiors. But others contained something. I approached one of the occupied chambers, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, suspended in a murky greenish fluid, was a form. It was vaguely humanoid, but wrong. The proportions were off, the limbs too long, the head too large. The skin was a sickly pale gray, and I could see strange dark veins pulsing beneath the surface. It was like something out of a nightmare, a grotesque parody of a human being. I turned away, bile rising in my throat. Lena was examining another chamber, her face a mask of horrified fascination. These aren't normal cryo chambers, she said, her voice trembling. The technology, I don't understand it. And the specimens, she trailed off, unable to articulate what she was seeing. Matthias was standing in a corner of the lab, his back to us, muttering to himself. He seemed to be getting worse, his mental state deteriorating rapidly. I was about to call out to him, when Luis's voice crackled over the radio. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice tight with anxiety. "The radios, they're not working properly. We can't reach the surface. All we're getting is static. And..." He hesitated. "And something else. A weird murmuring. It sounds like German." I exchanged a worried look with Lena. This was bad. We were cut off, trapped in this underground labyrinth with whatever those were. "Stay put," I said into the radio. "We're coming to you." We turned to leave the lab, but Matthias didn't move. He was staring at a large rectangular mirror that was propped against one wall, his reflection staring back at him. It's different now," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's watching me." I followed his gaze. His reflection was staring back at us, its face pale and strained. But it wasn't doing anything unusual. It was just a reflection. "Matthias, it's just a mirror," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We need to go." He didn't respond. He just kept staring at the mirror, his eyes wide and unfocused. And then, slowly, a horrifying grin spread across his reflection's face, a wide, unnatural grin that showed far too many teeth. I froze, my blood turning to ice. It was smiling, Matthias's reflection was definitely, undeniably smiling, and it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile of pure malice, of something ancient and evil. "Matthias," I said again, my voice now a hoarse whisper. "We need to go. Now." But it was too late. Matthias was transfixed, lost in some silent, terrifying conversation with his own reflection. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that we were no longer in control. Something else was. Something dark. Something powerful. Something that had been waiting for us in the depths of this forgotten Nazi bunker. And it was finally starting to show its true face. The murmuring Luis had mentioned on the radio, it seemed, was growing. Not from the radio unit, but from the very air around us. It surrounded us and sounded like a promise of something terrible. We managed to pull Matthias away from the mirror, practically dragging him out of the lab. His eyes were glazed over, his body trembling. He kept muttering about the whispers and the watcher, his words slurring together into an incomprehensible mess. Whatever was happening to him, it was getting worse. We needed to get out of here, and fast. We hurried back towards the main chamber, our footsteps echoing out through the silent corridors. The murmuring Luis had reported was getting louder, a low, guttural chanting in what I now recognized as archaic German. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, vibrating through the very walls of the bunker. The air grew heavy, oppressive, making it hard to breathe. We found Jonah, Alexander, and Luis huddled together near the entrance to the power generation sector. They looked shaken, their faces pale and strained. Luis was frantically trying to get the radio to work, but all that came out was a cacophony of static and those unnerving whispers. "It's no use," he said, his voice shaking. "We're completely cut off, and I think something's interfering with the equipment. The readings, they're off the charts." Lena, despite her own fear, took charge. "We need to find out what's going on," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "We need to understand what this place was really used for." We decided to explore the area near the power sector, hoping to find some kind of control room or central archive. We found a small office, its door slightly ajar. Inside, the walls were lined with bookshelves filled with dusty tomes and files. A single desk stood in the center of the room, covered in a thick layer of dust. On the desk, I spotted a leather-bound journal. It looked old, its pages yellowed and brittle. I picked it up carefully, brushing the dust off the cover. The title was written in elegant Gothic script. Tagebuch des Projekts Das Erwachen, Diary of Project The Awakening. This was it. This was the key to understanding what had happened here. I began to read, translating the German as best I could. The diary belonged to a Dr. Heinrich Schmidt, a scientist who appeared to have been the lead researcher on the project. He wrote about the discovery of something ancient, something powerful, buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice. Something that the Nazis believed could help them win the war, could help them create a new, superior race. The entries became increasingly frantic, increasingly disturbing. Schmidt described experiments, attempts to harness the power of it. He wrote about genetic manipulation, about merging human DNA with something else. Something that wasn't human. Something that was found under the ice. The something else he had found caused changes, big changes. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding in my chest. There were sketches, diagrams, horrifying depictions of things. Creatures that were part human, part something else. Grotesque, twisted forms that defied description. The final entries were almost illegible, scrawled in a shaky hand. Schmidt wrote about failure, about losing control, about the awakening of something he called Der Wächter, the Guardian. Lena, who had been looking over my shoulder, gasped. "Der Wächter," she whispered. It's a legend, a myth, a creature said to guard, something of immense power." As if on cue, the lights flickered, plunging us into near darkness. The murmuring intensified, growing into a deafening roar. The entire bunker began to shake, the walls groaning under some immense pressure. I looked up from the diary, my eyes drawn to a large sealed tank in the corner of the room. It was filled with a viscous, greenish liquid. and within it, I could just make out a shape, a large, indistinct form suspended in the fluid. It was moving. Matthias, who had been standing silently in the corner, suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. He pointed towards a darkened hallway, his eyes wide with terror. He's there," he shrieked. "I see him. He looks just like me, but, it's not me." We turned to look, our weapons raised. The hallway was empty. There was nothing there. But then I saw it. A flicker of movement, a shadow that seemed to detach itself from the wall. A figure, tall and gaunt, that did resemble Matthias. But it was distorted, twisted, its features blurred and indistinct. It was like looking at him through a warped lens. The figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving us staring at the empty hallway, our hearts pounding in our chests. The murmuring was now a chorus of voices, chanting in that archaic German, filling the bunker with a sense of dread and impending doom. The experiments of Neuschwabenland were no longer a mystery. They were a reality, and whatever they had created, whatever they had awakened, it was here. And it was hunting us. We were trapped in a nightmare of Nazi science and ancient evil, with no way out. The lights flickered again, this time dying completely, plunging us into absolute darkness. A chorus of screams and curses erupted from the team, quickly followed by the clicks of weapon lights snapping on, cutting through the black. The emergency generators should have kicked in, but they remained silent. We were shrouded in a darkness so complete it felt like a physical presence, pressing in on us from all sides. The murmuring, which had been a constant, unsettling presence, reached a fever pitch, morphing into a cacophony of guttural roars and shrieks. The bunker trembled violently, the concrete floor vibrating beneath our feet. It felt like the entire structure was about to collapse, burying us alive in this frozen tomb. "What the hell is happening?" Luis shouted over the din, his voice laced with panic. "I don't know," Lena yelled back, her voice strained. "But I think we woke something up." As if in answer to her words, a deafening crash echoed from somewhere deep within the bunker, followed by a series of metallic shrieks and groans. It sounded like something massive was moving. My radio crackled to life, but it wasn't Luis's voice that came through. It was a distorted, guttural voice, speaking in that same archaic German that Matthias had been muttering. The words were unintelligible, but the tone was unmistakable. Pure, unadulterated malice. Matthias, who had been cowering in a corner, suddenly stood up, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He began to recite the same phrases we were hearing over the radio, his voice blending with the distorted chorus, his words a terrifying counterpoint to the chaos around us. He's speaking the words," Lena whispered, her face ashen. "The words of invocation." Invocation? What had we stumbled into? This wasn't just a forgotten Nazi bunker. It was a temple, a prison, something. And we had broken the seal. Suddenly, I noticed something on the floor. Wet footprints, small but definitely footprints, leading away from the sealed tank in the corner of the room, the tank that had contained that thing. The tank was now empty, its thick glass shattered, the greenish fluid splattered across the floor. "Where did they come from?" asked Alexander. "I do not know, but I do not like it," I replied. Panic seized me. Whatever had been in that tank, it was now loose. And judging by the size of the footprints and the sounds echoing through the bunker, it was big. "We need to get out of here," I shouted, my voice barely audible above the din. "We need to get to the surface." We turned to leave, but the doorway was blocked. Not by a physical barrier, but by something. The air shimmered, distorted, like a heat haze. And within that haze, I could see shapes. Shadows, moving and twisting, taking on vaguely humanoid forms. They were like the figure we had seen in the hallway, but more. Many more. The shadows began to solidify, their forms becoming clearer. They were tall and gaunt, their limbs elongated and distorted. Their faces were blank, featureless, like masks. But I could feel their eyes on us, burning with a cold, ancient hatred. The radios were now screaming with that distorted German, the chanting reaching a crescendo. Matthias was laughing, a high-pitched, hysterical laugh that sent shivers down my spine. He was no longer one of us. He was something else. The bunker was no longer just shaking, it was tearing itself apart. Cracks appeared in the walls, the ceiling began to crumble, and the floor buckled beneath our feet. Whatever we had awakened, it was immensely powerful, and it was destroying everything around it. We were trapped, surrounded by shadows, by the chanting, by the collapsing bunker. And somewhere, in the darkness, something else was moving. Something big, something powerful, something that had been waiting for decades to be unleashed. The Guardian had awakened, and we were its prey. The feeling of dread was no longer a subtle undercurrent. It was a tidal wave, crashing over us, threatening to drown us in its icy depths. We had to find a way out, and we had to find it now. We fought our way back towards the main chamber, the shadows pressing in on us, their cold touch sending jolts of pain through our bodies. Matthias was gone, vanished into the darkness, his laughter echoing behind us like a mocking farewell. We had to leave him. We had to save ourselves. The main chamber was in chaos. The machinery that had once stood silent and still was now shaking violently. Sparks flying from damaged cables. The air thick with the smell of ozone and burning metal. The floor was cracked and uneven, making it difficult to move. Lena was frantically searching the walls, her hands running over the cold metal. "There's a hidden passage," she shouted, her voice barely audible above the din. "There has to be. The original blueprints showed a lower level, a sub-basement, but it wasn't on any of the maps we were given." She found it a moment later, a section of the wall that slid open with a grinding groan, revealing a dark, descending staircase. It was a narrow, claustrophobic passage, disappearing into the depths of the earth. The air that rushed out from it was even colder than before, carrying with it that same unsettling organic scent, now intensified tenfold. "We have no choice," I said, my voice grim. "We have to go down." We descended into the darkness, our weapon lights cutting through the gloom. The staircase was steep and treacherous, the steps covered in a layer of slippery ice. The murmuring was louder down here, a constant throbbing presence that seemed to vibrate through our very bones. The staircase opened into a vast, cavernous space, far larger than anything we had seen before. It was like an underground city, a sprawling network of corridors and chambers that stretched out into the darkness as far as our lights could reach. The scale of it was breathtaking and terrifying. This wasn't just a bunker, it was a subterranean. World-giant pillars, carved with strange, unsettling symbols, supported the ceiling. The walls were lined with something. It looked like metal, but it was organic. It pulsed with a faint, greenish light, like some kind of bioluminescent fungus. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else. Something sweet, sickly sweet that made my stomach churn. We moved cautiously through the corridors, our weapons raised, our senses on high alert. The shadows were everywhere down here, flitting at the edges of our vision, their forms constantly shifting and changing. We could hear them whispering, their voices a chorus of malice and hunger. We came to a massive circular chamber, its walls covered in the same strange, glowing symbols. In the center of the chamber stood a gigantic, sealed door. It was made of some dark, unknown metal, and it was covered in intricate carvings. The carvings depicted grotesque, twisted figures, creatures that were part human, part something else. They were like the creatures in Schmidt's diary, but worse. Far worse. Lena approached the door, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. She traced her fingers over the carvings, her lips moving silently as she read the inscription that ran along the top of the door. "Der Wächter ist nicht tot," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The Guardian is not dead." Alexander, who had been scanning the perimeter of the chamber, suddenly stiffened. "I hear something," he said, his voice low. "Behind us. Something moving." We turned, our weapon lights sweeping the darkness. At first, we saw nothing, but then the shadows began to coalesce, to take on form. They were tall and gaunt, their limbs elongated and distorted, their faces blank. featureless. But their eyes burned with a cold, ancient hatred. They were the same creatures we had seen before, but now there were dozens of them, surrounding us, blocking our escape. They were the guardians of this place, the protectors of whatever lay behind that massive door. And as we watched, the door began to open. Slowly, inexorably, the massive metal slabs sliding apart with a deafening groan. A blinding light erupted from within, forcing us to shield our eyes. The murmuring intensified, growing into a roar that shook the very foundations of the chamber. We were trapped in the heart of this subterranean world, surrounded by the shadows, facing the awakening of something ancient and evil. The true horror of Neuschwabenland was finally being revealed, and we were about to come face to face with its guardian. The lower level was not just a sub-basement. It was a gateway to something beyond human comprehension. And we had opened it. The massive door ground open completely, revealing a chamber bathed in an eerie green light. The light pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls. The air grew thick, heavy, making it hard to breathe. The murmuring had reached a crescendo, a deafening chorus of voices that seemed to vibrate through our very bones. And then, it emerged. At first, it was just a shapeless mass, a writhing blob of flesh and metal oozing out of the chamber like some kind of grotesque, living oil slick. It pulsed and throbbed, its surface covered in a network of pulsating veins and glistening chitinous plates. The smell was overwhelming, a combination of decay, chemicals, and that sickly sweet scent that made my stomach heave. Slowly, the mass began to take on form. Limbs extended, claws unfurled. A head, or something resembling a head, emerged from the writhing flesh. It was tall, far taller than any human, its body a grotesque fusion of organic and inorganic matter. Its skin was a patchwork of pale gray flesh and dark metallic plates. Its limbs were elongated and distorted, ending in wickedly sharp claws. And its head was the most terrifying part. It was vaguely humanoid, but its features were twisted and distorted, a grotesque parody of a human face. Its eyes were large and black, devoid of any emotion except for a cold, ancient hunger. Its mouth was a gaping maw filled with rows upon rows of razor-sharp teeth, and from its back sprouted a cluster of writhing tentacles, tipped with glistening barbed hooks. This was Der Vector, the Guardian, the culmination of the Nazis' twisted experiments, the creature they had sought to control, to weaponize. And it was now free. Matthias, who had somehow found his way down here, stumbled into the chamber, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and reverence. He fell to his knees, his arms outstretched, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Mein Meister," he croaked, his voice cracking. "Der Meister ist zurückgekehrt. My master. The master has returned." He was speaking in that same archaic German, the words pouring from his lips like a prayer. He was no longer a soldier, no longer a human being. He was a thrall, a puppet, controlled by the creature before us. Jonah, ever the pragmatist, reacted instantly. He raised his rifle and opened fire, the bullets ripping through the air and slamming into the creature's flesh. But they had no effect. The bullets simply embedded themselves in the creature's hide, absorbed by the pulsating flesh. The Guardian turned its attention to Jonah, its black eyes narrowing. It let out a deafening roar, a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. And then it moved. With terrifying speed, it lunged towards Jonah, its claws outstretched. The movement was a blur, too fast for the eye to follow. I saw Jonah raise his weapon to try to parry the beast, but it was useless. Lena screamed, a piercing shriek that was cut short by a sickening crunch. The Guardian had reached Jonah, its claws tearing through his armor and flesh as if they were paper. "Jonah, no!" Alexander cried and started shooting at the creature. I stood frozen, paralyzed by horror, watching as the creature lifted Jonah's lifeless body into the air, its claws dripping with blood. It opened its gaping maw and I won't describe what happened next. It was too gruesome, too horrifying. Suffice it to say that Jonah O'Neill, the brave, reckless Irish soldier, was gone. Consumed by the creature he had tried to kill, Lena was screaming, sobbing uncontrollably. Luis was firing his weapon wildly, his bullets having no more effect than Jonah's. Alexander, his face a mask of grim determination, unleashed a barrage of fire from his heavy machine gun. But the bullets just bounced off the creature's hide, harmlessly deflected by its metallic plates. The Guardian turned its attention to the rest of us, its black eyes burning with a cold, ancient hunger. It was like looking into the abyss, into the face of pure evil. Lena, regaining a semblance of composure, screamed at us, "The bunker!" It wasn't abandoned. It was sealed. Sealed to keep this thing inside. She was right. The Nazis hadn't abandoned Neuschwabenland. They had trapped themselves along with their creation in this frozen hell, and we had unwittingly released it. We were outmatched, outgunned, facing a creature that was beyond our comprehension, beyond our ability to defeat. Our only hope was to escape, to somehow get back to the surface and seal this place forever. But with the Guardian between us and the exit, and the bunker collapsing around us, our chances of survival were slim to none. The awakening of the Guardian was not just a threat to us, it was a threat to the entire world, and we were the only ones who knew about it. We turned and ran, fleeing back through the labyrinthine corridors of the lower level, the Guardian's deafening roars echoing behind us. The bunker was collapsing around us, the walls cracking, the ceiling crumbling, the floor buckling beneath our feet. It was like running through a nightmare, a maze of death and destruction. The shadows were everywhere, flitting at the edges of our vision, their forms constantly shifting and changing. They were like extensions of the Guardian, its will made manifest, hindering our escape at every turn. Matthias was still with the creature, his twisted allegiance a horrifying testament to the Guardian's power. We could hear him chanting in that archaic German, his voice a distorted echo of the creature's roars. He was lost, a sacrifice to the Nazis' hubris and our own naivety. Lena, despite her terror, was our only hope. She was the only one who understood the bunker's design, the only one who might know of a way out. "There has to be another way," she shouted, her voice hoarse. The original blueprints, they showed emergency exits, escape tunnels, but they weren't on the maps we were given. We continued to run, dodging falling debris and weaving through the collapsing corridors. The Guardian was gaining on us, its massive form shaking the very foundations of the bunker. We could hear its claws scraping against the floor, the sound growing closer and closer. Luis, his face pale and strained, was frantically trying to contact the surface, but the radio was still useless, emitting only that terrifying chorus of distorted German voices. "It's no use," he shouted. "We're trapped. We're all going to die down here." Alexander, his usual stoicism replaced by a grim determination, fired a burst from his machine gun at the pursuing shadows, slowing them down momentarily. "We are not going to die," he said, his voice firm. "We will find a way out." Lena suddenly stopped, her eyes widening. "The power!" she exclaimed. "The bunker! It's still generating power, but how? The generators should have run out of fuel decades ago." She ran towards a section of the wall, her hands tracing the strange, glowing symbols. "There's something here," she said, her voice trembling. "Something feeding the bunker. Something in the ice." She found a hidden panel, a small, almost invisible seam in the wall. She pressed it, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow, dark passage. "This is it," she shouted. "An emergency escape tunnel. It leads... I don't know where it leads, but it's our only chance." We hesitated for a moment, looking back at the main corridor. The Guardian was almost upon us, its massive form filling the passage, its roars shaking the very air. We had no choice. We scrambled into the escape tunnel, Lena leading the way. The passage was narrow and claustrophobic, barely wide enough for us to move single file. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. As we ran, Lena explained what she had realized. "The bunker. It's not powered by conventional generators," she said, her voice breathless. "It's powered by something else. Something they found in the ice. Something alive. That something, I realized with a growing sense of horror, was what was feeding the Guardian, what was giving it its power. And it was also what was keeping the bunker functioning, even after all these years. We came to a junction, the tunnel, branching off in two directions. Lena hesitated, unsure of which way to go. "We need to seal the bunker," I said, my voice grim. "We need to find a way to stop that creature, to prevent it from reaching the surface." We look at each other, and we all agree. Luis spoke. "The explosives," he said. "We planted them in the main chamber, but they didn't work. The interference, it was too strong." Lena shook her head. "They won't work down here either," she said. "Whatever is powering the bunker, it's interfering with the detonators. We need to find another way. A manual override. Something to collapse the tunnels, to seal the lower level." We decided to split up, Lena and I taking one branch of the tunnel, Alexander and Luis taking the other. We agreed to meet back at the junction in 15 minutes. Lena and I ran through the narrow passage, our hearts pounding in our chests. The tunnel was twisting and turning, leading us deeper and deeper into the earth. We came to a small chamber, its walls lined with strange, glowing symbols. In the center of the chamber was a console, covered in dials and levers. "This is it," Lena said, her voice trembling. "A control panel. It might be a way to activate the bunker's self-destruct system, or at least to collapse the access tunnels." She began to work frantically, her fingers flying over the controls. The console sparked and sputtered, but it seemed to be responding. Suddenly, we heard a roar, a deafening sound that shook the very walls of the chamber. The Guardian. It had found us. We turned to see the creature bursting through the tunnel entrance, its massive form filling the doorway. It was enraged, its eyes burning with a cold, ancient fury. There was no escape. We were trapped. Lena continued to work, her face pale but determined. "I need more time," she shouted. "Just hold it back." I raised my rifle, knowing that it was useless, that I was about to die. But I would buy Lena as much time as I could. I would fight to the end. Suddenly, we listened footsteps. It was Alexander running. "I will stay," he said. "Go, go, go." He did not wait for an answer and started firing his machine gun at the Guardian. We ran. We ran as fast as we could, the sounds of Alexander's battle echoing behind us. The roars of the Guardian, the bursts of machine gun fire, and then silence. Alexander, the stoic, watchful Russian soldier, had sacrificed himself to buy us time. He had given his life to save ours. We reached the junction. Luis was waiting. He looked at us. His face showed that he understood. We ran, trying to find the exit, trying to find a way out. The bunker was a tomb, the expedition a disaster. We ran, Lena, Luis and I, through the twisting, collapsing tunnels, the echoes of Alexander's sacrifice ringing in our ears. The bunker was groaning and shaking around us, the air thick with dust and the stench of decay. We had no idea where we were going, only that we had to get out, had to find a way to the surface. The escape tunnels seemed to go on forever, a claustrophobic, seemingly endless passage that twisted and turned, leading us deeper and deeper into the earth. We were exhausted, our lungs burning, our muscles aching, but we couldn't stop. We had to keep moving. Finally, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, a circular room with a high vaulted ceiling. In the center of the chamber stood a massive metal door, similar to the one that had held the Guardian, but smaller. This door, however, was sealed. "This is it," Lena said, her voice breathless. "An emergency exit. It should lead to the surface, or to another part of the bunker." She examined the door, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings that covered its surface. "The mechanism. It's damaged," she said, her voice filled with despair. "It's jammed. We can't open it." We were trapped. Again. The Guardian was still out there, somewhere in the collapsing tunnels, hunting us. And we were cornered, with no way out. Luis, his face pale and strained, began to pound on the door, his fists making a dull, thudding sound against the thick metal. We have to. Get out of here, he shouted, his voice bordering on hysteria. We have to! I tried to calm him, but I knew how he felt. The fear was overwhelming, a suffocating presence that threatened to consume us. We were so close to escaping, and yet, so far. Suddenly, Lena gasped. Wait, she said, her eyes widening. There's something here. Another mechanism. Hidden. She ran her hands over the wall near the door, her fingers searching for something. She found it a moment later. A small, almost invisible panel, concealed behind one of the carvings. She pressed the panel, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a small, dark alcove. Inside, there was another console, similar to the one we had seen in the previous chamber, but older, more archaic. I don't understand, Lena said, her voice trembling. This is an older system. A backup. It's connected to the original defense mechanisms of the bunker. She began to work frantically, her fingers flying over the controls. The console sparked and sputtered, but it seemed to be responding. What are you doing? I asked, my voice tense. I'm trying to reactivate the original defenses, she said, her voice strained. The ones the Nazis designed to contain the creature, to seal the lower levels. But how? I asked. The bunker is collapsing. The power is failing. There's a failsafe, she said, her eyes glued to the console. A manual override. It requires a direct connection. Someone has to stay here, to operate the controls. I understood immediately. It was a suicide mission. Someone had to stay behind, to sacrifice themselves to seal the bunker, to stop the Guardian from reaching the surface. Luis, his face ashen, looked at Lena, then at me. He knew what she was saying. He knew what had to be done. He was going to volunteer, I knew it. Before any of us could say a word, Lena spoke. I will stay, she said. Her voice was quiet, but I listened to steely determination. No, Luis protested. No way. We find another solution. There is no other way. And there is no time, Lena replied, looking at both. I know this place. I can operate this. You two go. Escape. We tried to argue, but Lena was adamant. Time was short. The noises outside were getting closer. Lena looked at me, her expression resolute. Go, she said, her voice firm. Get out of here, and tell the world what happened here. Make sure this never happens again. We hesitated for a moment, torn between our desire to escape and our loyalty to Lena. But we knew she was right. There was no other way. Luis and I turned and ran, leaving Lena alone in the chamber, her fingers working frantically at the console. We ran back through the escape tunnel, our hearts pounding in our chests, the image of Lena's determined face burned into our minds. We reached the junction, the point where we had split up earlier. We took the other path, the one that Alexander and Luis had taken, hoping that it would lead us to the surface. As we ran, we heard a deafening roar behind us, followed by a series of explosions. The bunker was shaking violently, the walls cracking, the ceiling collapsing. Lena had done it. She had activated the defenses. She had sealed the lower level. But at what cost? We ran on, our lungs burning, our muscles aching. The tunnel was collapsing around us, but we didn't stop. We had to get out. We had to survive. We finally reached the end of the tunnel, a small opening that led to the surface. We scrambled out, blinking in the sudden blinding light of the Antarctic sun. We were outside. We were free. But we were not safe. The bunker was still collapsing, the ground shaking beneath our feet. And as we watched, the entrance to the escape tunnel sealed itself shut. A massive slab of rock and ice sliding into place, blocking the way forever. We were alone, Luis and I, stranded in the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, the only survivors of a mission that had gone horribly wrong. We had escaped the Nazi bunker, but we had lost everything. We had lost our comrades, our friends, our innocence, and somewhere, deep beneath the ice, the Guardian was still trapped, sealed within its subterranean prison. But for how long? The nagging doubt lingered, a chilling reminder that the horror might not be over. The sacrifices made might only delay the inevitable. The true cost of Neuschwabenland was yet to be fully revealed, and we were left with the burden of that knowledge, a burden we would carry for the rest of our lives. We stumbled away from the collapsing bunker, the ground still trembling beneath our feet. The Antarctic wind whipped at us, the cold a sharp contrast to the stifling heat of the tunnels. We were exhausted, both physically and emotionally drained, the horrors we had witnessed etched into our minds. We looked back at the site where the entrance to Neuschwabenland had been. Nothing remained but a vast, snow-covered expanse, a seemingly untouched landscape that belied the terrors that lay beneath. It was as if the bunker had never existed, swallowed whole by the ice. But we knew the truth. We knew what lay buried beneath that frozen wasteland. And we knew that Lena's sacrifice, and the sacrifices of Alexander, Jonah, and Matthias, might only be a temporary reprieve. As we stood there, huddled together against the biting wind, we heard a series of loud, cracking sounds, like the snapping of giant trees. We looked up, our hearts pounding in our chests. The ice around us was beginning to crack, fissures spreading across the surface like spiderwebs. "What's happening?" Luis shouted, his voice filled with panic. I didn't know, but I had a terrible feeling. A feeling that Lena hadn't just sealed the bunker, she had triggered something else, something bigger. The cracking grew louder, the fissures wider, and then, with a deafening roar, a section of the ice shelf collapsed, plunging into the dark, frigid waters below. The ground beneath our feet began to shake violently, and we realized with a growing sense of horror that we were standing on unstable ground. We had to get out of here. We had to get to safety. But where was safety? We were miles from the nearest base, stranded in the middle of a collapsing ice field, with no way to call for help. We began to run, desperately trying to find solid ground, but the ice was cracking and breaking all around us. It was like running through a minefield, each step potentially our last. As we ran, I noticed something in the distance, a faint, greenish glow emanating from beneath the ice. It was the same glow we had seen in the lower levels of the bunker, the same eerie light that had surrounded the Guardian. The glow was spreading, growing brighter, illuminating the ice from below, and as it spread, the cracking intensified, the ice shelf groaning and buckling under some immense pressure. Lena's actions, I realized with a sickening certainty, hadn't just sealed the bunker. They had activated something ancient, something powerful, something that the Nazis had discovered beneath the ice, something that was now awakening. We reached a slightly more stable section of the ice, a small, isolated plateau that seemed to be holding. We collapsed there, exhausted and terrified, watching as the ice around us continued to crack and break. The greenish glow was now visible everywhere, illuminating the entire ice field from below. It pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, casting eerie shadows that danced across the snow. And then, we heard it. A low, guttural rumbling, coming from deep beneath the ice. It was a sound that resonated through our very bones, a sound of immense power and ancient evil. It was the sound of the Guardian, but it was different now. It was stronger, more powerful, as if it were drawing energy from something else, something even more vast and terrifying. Suddenly, the ice in front of us exploded, sending a shower of ice and snow into the air. A massive, tentacled limb, far larger than anything we had seen, in the bunker erupted from the depths, reaching towards the sky. It was followed by another, and another, and another. Dozens of tentacles, each one thicker than a tree trunk, were emerging from the ice, their barbed hooks glistening in the eerie green light. And then, slowly, inexorably, the thing itself began to rise. It was no longer just the Guardian. It was something more. Something that had merged with the entity the Nazis had found beneath the ice. Something that had become a part of the Antarctic landscape itself. It was a colossal mass of flesh, metal, and ice. A monstrous fusion of organic and inorganic matter. Its form was constantly shifting and changing, its tentacles writhing and lashing, its eyes burning with a cold, ancient fury. As the creature fully emerged, we could spot, embedded on the creature, something moving. It was small, but we could see it. It was Matthias. He was still alive, but completely fused with the creature, part of it. He saw us, and with a sadistic grin, saluted us. We were facing something beyond our comprehension, something that defied all natural laws. It was a creature of nightmare, a god of the ice, a being of unimaginable power. And as it rose, the doors that Lena had closed started to open. Slowly, but they started to open, and we could see shadows moving again. The ritual was not final, it was starting again. We were trapped on a small, isolated island of ice, facing a monster that was beyond our ability to defeat. Our escape had been an illusion. Our sacrifice, in vain. The horror of Neuschwabenland had not ended. It had just begun. And we were about to witness its full, terrifying power. We watched, paralyzed by terror, as the colossal creature continued to rise from the ice, its tentacles lashing out, its form constantly shifting and changing. The ground beneath our feet trembled violently, and the air was filled with the deafening roar of the collapsing ice shelf and the creature's monstrous cries. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. We were trapped on a shrinking island of ice, facing a being of unimaginable power. Our weapons were useless, our training irrelevant. We were going to die. But then, as suddenly as it had begun, the creature stopped its ascent. It remained there, half submerged in the ice, its tentacles writhing, its eyes burning with a cold, ancient fury. It was as if it were waiting. Waiting. For what? The answer came a moment later. We heard a faint, rhythmic throbbing coming from deep beneath the ice. It was the same throbbing we had felt in the lower levels of the bunker, the same pulsing energy that had powered the Guardian. But now it was different. It was stronger, more focused, as if it were being directed. And then we saw it, a beam of greenish light shooting up from the ice directly towards the creature. The light enveloped the creature, bathing it in an eerie glow. And as it did, the creature began to change. Its form became more defined, its features more distinct. Its tentacles retracted slightly, its body becoming more solid, more controlled. It was as if the energy beam were shaping it, molding it, giving it purpose. The throbbing intensified, and the beam of light grew brighter. And then we heard a voice. It was a distorted, guttural voice, speaking in that same archaic German we had heard in the bunker. But this time, it was clearer, more powerful. It was the voice of the Guardian, amplified, magnified, projected across the frozen wasteland. "Du musst zurückkehren," the voice boomed, its words echoing across the ice. "Der Meister darf nicht allein sein." You must return. The Master cannot be alone. The words were addressed to us? I looked at Luis, my eyes wide with confusion and terror. What did it mean? What did the creature want? Luis shook his head, his face pale and strained. I don't know, he whispered. But I don't like it. I don't like it at all. The voice boomed again, its words even more insistent. Du musst zurückkehren. Es ist dein Schicksal. You must return. It is your destiny. Destiny? What destiny? We were soldiers, not whatever this creature wanted us to be. Suddenly, I understood. The creature, the thing that the Nazis had found beneath the ice. It needed hosts, vessels. It needed us. It wanted us to return to the bunker, to become a part of it, to join Matthias in his twisted, horrifying existence. It wanted to merge with us, to absorb us, to make us a part of its monstrous form. We had to get out of here. We had to escape, before it was too late. But how? The ice was still collapsing around us, and the creature was blocking our only path to safety. As if in answer to our prayers, we heard a sound in the distance, a faint whirring sound growing closer and closer. It was a helicopter. We looked up. our hearts pounding with a mixture of hope and desperation. The helicopter was approaching, rapidly, its searchlight sweeping across the ice. It was our rescue, our chance to escape. But as the helicopter drew nearer, I realized something. Something terrible. The creature. It was reacting to the helicopter. Its tentacles began to lash out, its body thrashing violently, as if it were trying to swat it out of the sky. The helicopter was in danger. If it got too close, the creature would destroy it, killing everyone on board. We had to make a choice. We could signal the helicopter, try to get rescued, and risk the lives of the crew. Or we could let it pass, remain stranded, and hope that the creature would lose interest in us, that it would go back into the ice. It was an impossible choice. A choice between our own survival and the lives of others. A choice between hope and despair. I looked at Luis, my eyes filled with tears. He understood. He knew what we had to do. We made our decision. A decision that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. We didn't signal the helicopter. We watched, our hearts breaking as it flew past us, its searchlight sweeping across the ice, oblivious to the horror that lay beneath. We watched as it disappeared into the distance, taking with it our last hope of rescue. And as the helicopter vanished, the creature calmed down. Its thrashing subsided, its tentacles retracted, its eyes turned back to us. The voice boomed again, its words filled with a chilling satisfaction. Gut. Du hast gewählt. Good. You have chosen. Chosen? We hadn't chosen anything. We had been forced, manipulated, driven to this point by the horrors we had witnessed, by the sacrifices we had made. We were stranded, alone, facing a monster that wanted to consume us. Our escape had been an illusion, our hope a lie. The helicopter reached the base. We knew they will ask questions. What are we going to say? Luis asked. I knew that nobody will believe us. I knew it. We are going to say that the bunker collapsed before we could investigate it. Nothing more, I replied. We reached an agreement. The world was not ready for this. We were not ready for this. We arrived at the base a few hours later, rescued by another search party. We told our lie, sticking to our story, omitting the horrors. We had witnessed the sacrifices that had been made. We were debriefed, questioned, interrogated, but we held firm. We maintained our silence, our secret, our burden. And as we left the base, as we prepared to return to our lives, I knew that we would never be the same. We would never forget the horrors of Neuschwabenland, the creature that lay beneath the ice, the voices that whispered in the darkness. We had survived, but at what cost? We had escaped with our lives, but we had lost something essential. Our innocence, our peace of mind, our faith in the world. And as I looked back at the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, I couldn't help but wonder, had we really escaped? Or had we simply postponed the inevitable? Had we sealed the bunker? Or had we merely opened something far, far worse? The footprints. There were footprints in the snow. Footprints leading away the bunker. Footprints that were not ours. The doubt, the chilling uncertainty, lingered. The nightmare was not over. It was just beginning. Weeks later, I was back at base, trying to readjust to a life that felt alien. The routine, the normalcy, the mundane details of everyday existence. They all seemed meaningless, insignificant, compared to the horrors I had witnessed in Antarctica. I was a ghost, a shell of my former self, haunted by the memories of Neuschwabenland, by the faces of my fallen comrades, by the creature that lay beneath the ice. Luis and I had kept our secret, sticking to our fabricated story, enduring the endless debriefings and psychological evaluations. We had been cleared for duty, declared fit to return to active service. But we were not fit. We were broken, damaged, forever scarred by what we had seen. We rarely spoke about it, even to each other. The unspoken agreement hung between us, a silent pact to protect the world and ourselves from the truth. But the silence was a heavy burden, a constant reminder of the lies we were living, of the horror that we were concealing. I found myself drawn to maps of Antarctica, staring at the vast white expanse, searching for the location of Neuschwabenland, for the place where our lives had changed forever. I knew it was pointless, dangerous even, but I couldn't help myself. I was drawn to it, pulled by some unseen force, by the lingering echoes of the whispers in the darkness. One night, I was sitting alone in my quarters, staring at a map of the Antarctic coastline, when I heard it. A faint, static-filled sound coming from my old military radio, which I kept as a memento. I hadn't used it since the mission, hadn't even turned it on, but it was on now. I approached the radio cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The static grew louder, crackling and hissing, filling the room with an unsettling noise. And then, through the static, I heard it. A voice. It was a distorted, guttural voice, speaking in that same archaic German that had haunted us in the bunker. But this time, it was different. It was familiar. Du musst zurückkehren, the voice whispered, its words barely audible above the static. Der Meister darf nicht allein sein. You must return. The Master cannot be alone. It was the same message we had heard on the ice, the same chilling invitation to join the creature in its frozen prison. But the voice was different. It was Matthias. I stared at the radio, my blood turning to ice. It was Matthias. The distorted, guttural tones were unmistakable. He was alive, or at least some part of him was. He was still connected to the creature, still a part of its monstrous existence. And he was calling to me. I backed away from the radio, my hands trembling. I wanted to smash it, to destroy it, to silence the voice that was reaching out to me from the depths of the Antarctic. But I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed by fear, by the horrifying realization that the nightmare was not over. The voice whispered again, its words even more insistent. Du musst zurückkehren. Es ist dein Schicksal. You must return. It is your destiny. I finally found the strength to turn off the radio, plunging the room into silence. But the silence was not empty. It was filled with the echoes of Matthias's voice, with the whispers of the creature, with the chilling reminder that Neuschwabenland was still out there, waiting. I sat there, alone in the darkness, staring at the map of Antarctica, my mind racing. Had we really sealed the bunker, or had we merely strengthened the creature, given it a new awareness, a new connection to the outside world? The footprints in the snow, the footprints that were not ours, they haunted me. They were a sign, a warning, a chilling indication that the creature, or some part of it, was still active, still searching. I knew that I could never go back. I could never face that horror again. But I also knew that I could never truly escape it. The creature was a part of me now, a part of my nightmares, a part of my reality. And as I looked at the map, at the vast white expanse of Antarctica, I couldn't help but wonder, was it only a matter of time before the whispers in the darkness became a roar? Was it only a matter of time before the creature, or something else, emerged from the ice to claim its destiny, to spread its horror across the world? The story ends not with a resolution, but with a question that hangs in the air, unanswered, a chilling reminder that some horrors are never truly buried, that some secrets are never truly safe. The whisper in the darkness remains, a constant, unsettling presence, a warning that the nightmare of Neuschwabenland is far from over, and perhaps it never will be. The icy grip of the Antarctic and the creature it conceals holds a power that extends far beyond the frozen wasteland, a power that can reach across continents, across oceans, to touch the lives of those who dared to disturb its slumber. And the question remains, who will be next?